This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hey there, Storyworks writers. This week, I pulled an episode from the library all about writing prompts because with COVID flaring up and this being a holiday weekend, at least it is if you're in the United States, well, things are shutting down, plans are canceling, family gatherings are going virtual. These are strange times. And if we're going to be stuck at home feeling a little out of sorts or blue or funky, I thought, what better way to pick ourselves up than to play with some writing prompts? In this episode, Robert, Catherine, and I each bring writing prompts to the table. So I think you're going to have 15 different prompts to choose from. And then we select one. We go off, set a timer for 15 minutes, free write, and come back and share what happened in our free writing, which is in a different episode, but I will link to it in the show notes. And, come over to the Storyworks Writers Facebook group, talk about how your prompt went, which one you chose. If you made any fun discoveries there, share your work. That's the Storyworks Writers Facebook group. We would love to hear from you. And if you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I've got a bonus writing prompt for you, one that is not in the episode. So make sure you check that out too. I hope that you have a great weekend and a really enjoyable Thanksgiving, whatever that looks like. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Storyworks Roundtable. We are going to be talking about writing prompts this week. So, Robert and Catherine, have you done a lot of writing prompts?
Oh, I've done my fair share, that's for sure.
I've written plenty, but never used them.
Uh-oh. Aren't you supposed to test the prompt before giving it out?
No, I'll be the guinea pig. Well, yes and no. I mean, in my head, we used to use them on a different podcast. So occasionally I'll be writing. Well, actually, I wrote them. I wrote one every week, pertinent to the particular theme of the whatever book we'd reviewed, and I found it very helpful to try and kind of distill down the theme of the book that I just read into a prompt that I could then take and then use. But I don't need them, so I've never felt. So this is going to be interesting for me.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't need them. Why not?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of a writing prompt, and when do you need it? When do you not? Let's start there.
I think there are two different kinds of writing prompts. I think there's the kind that are designed to just get you writing, to try and get your imagination and your creativity going. And they aren't necessarily going to create a full story. Sometimes they're just little vignettes or little snippets of scenes or things just to get your creativity flowing. And then there are other kinds of writing prompts that are designed to help you with the story that you're working on, to try to mold or create. I've used writing prompts for backstory or to work on a character or to figure out different point of views and which one works best. So I think there are two different kinds of writing prompts, and they're each useful in their own way. It just depends on where you're at and what you need in that moment as a writer. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Catherine. I like what you were just saying, that we've got writing prompts just to grease the wheels, and then you've got writing prompts to help you deal with the specific craft issue, which, I write lots of them. All of the exercises in the books I'm writing in the Storyworks series are essentially writing prompts. I'm giving people assignments to help them practice a specific aspect of the craft I'm talking about in that moment.
Exactly. And those are the ones that I tend to try and focus on, especially if I'm in the middle of a project. I don't want to even take 5 minutes sometimes to say, oh, well, I'm just going to pull this sentence and write 500 words. Like that may be the only 500 words I'm going to write that day. So if I'm going to use a writing prompt at that point, like it's going to be something that's going to help me with moving my story forward, whether that's a character-based writing prompt or a plot-based writing prompt or something that gets me back into my world that I can use later.
Right. Okay. That's really interesting how you just said that might be the only 500 words you write that day. It brings up some really great points because the point of a writing prompt for me anyway is always to free write. And whenever I give a writing prompt, I want people to free write. So there's no perfectionism. You turn off the internal editor and you just keep your hand moving. So even if it's a craft prompt, the goal is to get the wheels turning and to let the words flow, and then you can analyze it to see where the craft lesson is in there afterwards. But, if I'm working on a book and I get stuck, a prompt, some free writing can be a really great way to get me unstuck without taking me away from that story. Because it's always my prerogative to adapt the prompt to my current work, to use my protagonist in that writing prompt. Even if the setting is different, even if the action is different, it's still developing my current project. Robert, I feel like we're going to say something, but maybe not.
No, I'm soaking it all up. It's a tool that's it's obviously not a tool that's new to me, but it's not a tool that I've ever used. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe I use them, but they're in my head or something, or, because like every person, I suppose you get stuck, not necessarily, I don't believe in writer's block, but, there are times when you have a scene or an action, something's just not quite right. And so I might then go off and do something else, but it's replaying in my head. And that's part of the problem, is that if you're a writer and you write from home and, there are people around, and so I'll kind of go out to the kitchen to grab a coffee or something, and I'm still in my head and I'm processing the story, and all of a sudden somebody's asking me about whether I put the garbage out or not, and it's completely ruined. And I guess at that point, my writing prompt probably was in my head, and then I lost it. So, it's. I guess I could do something such as, if I am feeling stuck and I'm kind of wandering out to the kitchen, I should write down the prompt, or what isn't necessarily a prompt, but a signal for me to come back. How some people like to finish their rough drafts with, in mid-sentence, so that when they come back the next morning, they know where to pick up. I can see the use there. I just never saw any. I couldn't see how they were useful for me in a generic sense of, okay, just take this writing prompt and write something. Yeah, but why?
Right. Well, I think that's a really valid point, because it could be easy to say, well, those are for the beginning writers. Those are just, but they're really generative, which is why they're so great to use as a teacher, because everybody is writing on the spot. So nobody has anything prepared. You say to your workshop, here's the prompt, go. And everybody's head down, pens moving until you call time. And so people who come in saying, oh, I can't really write, but I just thought this would be fun, they read their free writing, and the classroom is going, ooh, it's so wonderful. And I think sometimes those surprises are the best kind of writing, that generative, where it's purely generative, where you have no agenda other than like, here's a starting point, this is a jumping off point, And a friend
we talked a little bit about kind of this idea in our ideas episode, where we were talking about how creativity creates more creativity.
Right.
And sometimes you need that initial writing prompt, like in a workshop or even at home, like to find that initial burst of creativity, and then you will build off of that and build off of that and build off of that. So it gets your brain going in the right direction, and doing it a little bit every day. I mean, if you don't think you have any ideas, a writing prompt's a really great way to trigger something that will then continue to get your brain in the right mode.
Yeah, a friend of mine who we were in the MFA program together, he's working on an epic fantasy right now, and he started recently doing a writing prompt every morning, kind of as a warm-up to his writing, but he sets a timer so it's 10 or 15 minutes and no more than that. So he can't, even if he's starting off in a great direction, he can't let it sidetrack his day and take him away from his novel. But it is just that impetus to get you out of the starting gate, at a full run. And I haven't tried that yet, but I'm really intrigued by the idea, and he's loving it. Just that quick burst of, it's like greasing your creative wheels with a prompt every day. And if your free writing is crap, it doesn't matter because it's just 10 minutes. But if it's really good, you've got this journal later that you can go back and pull your good story ideas out of it.
And I think the important thing in that is the 10 minutes. Don't let it eat your whole writing time.
Right. I mean, if you don't have a project and you're looking for ideas, run with it. But when you do have a project, just keep it as that journal, Robert, what were you going to say?
It's a clever idea, isn't it? Because, if you take that metaphor, the brain is a muscle and, you must to use it or lose it type of thing. And occasionally I will find, if I sit down to write, that there's a little bit of throat clearing that's got to go on. And I suppose that's one way of getting rid of the throat clearing and not feel like you're coming back. Okay, it may mean that you produce a cleaner first draft because that kind of flow state's already triggered a bit from that idea. And like you say, it could produce something that's lateral to the main story that you could use later in a novella or a short or just something that informs you about setting, backstory, character, plot.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. So do we have some writing prompts here to share with each other?
Yeah, that's good. I have 5 that I picked out.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, awesome. I brought 2 to the game, 2 to the table today.
Is there a format for a writing prompt?
No, I don't think so. I mean, when it's just whatever creates that jumping off point to start writing. So
should they end all mine end in a question? I've always made them end in a question. So should they end in a question? He says ending in a question.
Not necessarily. Like the ones I write for my craft books give people instructions like you're going to write about this scenario or you're going to write with this kind of character or this kind of point of view. And if you've got something you're working on, you can use those characters in that scenario. But if you don't, here are 3 potential scenarios to use as jumping off point. Now go write. So I think both methods work great for writing prompts. It could be a question format. It could be more of an instructional narrative. So
I have my favorite writing prompts are the ones that give me like a sentence that has like a conflict and a character in it, or maybe a piece of dialogue, and it just leaves it completely open, so that you literally just have like, here's your 2-word description of a character. Here's the 2-word description of the conflict. It's in a sentence, so you can use either with or without the setting that they have provided, and then you just go like wherever your brain goes. I tend to do better with things that are more like snippets that you then have to work into a story than something that's a lot more descriptive, at least in terms of getting just a free writing kind of thing going. If I'm really working on like a piece of craft, then I prefer to be the more specific, the better.
Right.
Or having questions in there. But if I'm just trying to grease my wheels and like get myself writing, then just having something that's intriguing is my favorite.
Definitely. All right. So what is the best or the worst experience you've had with a writing prompt? Should I answer first to give you time to think?
Yeah.
Okay. So When I was in the MFA program, I had a class, Groundings in Fiction, and the professor made us all bring in newspaper clippings, and then we had to pass them like so many spaces to the side, and then you got stuck with like 2 newspaper clippings from different people, and we had to go home, pick one of our 2 clippings, write a story. We had a very tight word count. It had to be a short, and then turn it in for a grade. So I hated this assignment. I was like, oh my God, okay, I don't get to pick my own prompt. Some stranger in my class is going to pass something to me. What if it totally sucks? And then, I have to come up with a story based on this. And I was really grouchy about this assignment. So, my newspaper clipping, the one I chose to write on, was about an incident at a small zoo in Wisconsin. This woman in her 50s and her boyfriend had brought her granddaughter, like a preschooler, to the zoo. And this was not a very up-to-date zoo. And the black bears were behind a fence. And she went off the path and up to the fence to show off to her granddaughter and stuck a hot dog through the fence. Well, a bear came over to eat the hot dog and took 2 of her fingers with it. So this was my news story. So I wrote a story called Wild Animal about this event, but it's from the bear's perspective. So I have narrator bear and other bear, who's his companion in the observation pen. And narrator bear is kind of an anthropologist at heart. So he's observing the Homo sapiens and telling this whole story and everything. And it's a really funny story, actually. My twisted sense of humor. But the story was published in Storm Cellar Quarterly. And
Wow.
the editor there nominated it for a Pushcart Prize. So out of this really awful assignment came all of that.
It just goes to show you just don't know where a really good creative idea
Yeah,
comes
you really
from.
don't.
None of us have any idea.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's that funny thing, isn't it, where writers often, the most common question you might be asked is, where do you get your ideas?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm walking down the street,
Right.
when I'm reading a newspaper. There's no answer to that question.
Yeah,
where did you get your brain from?
Right. And it goes to show you as well that even if a writing prompt looks stupid or you aren't in the mood for it, if you just keep an open mind and give it those 15 minutes, you never know what's going to start clicking into place.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the best and the worst?
Yes. Yeah. Started out as the worst, ended as the best.
I like it. That's very good.
Mm-hmm. We have a new podcast joining the Storyworks family in early 2021. The Storyworks Reading Series is a literary journal for the ears. Every month, an author will read a new short story or lyric essay. Then sit down with me to discuss its inspiration, the writing process, and challenges. Storyworks Reading Series is a podcast that gives voice to your story and you. Let your writing and reading friends know about Storyworks Reading Series, and if you're a writer, go to storyworkspodcast.com/submit. Read our submission guidelines and send us something. I am so looking forward to reading your work and even chatting with you on the podcast. Do either of you have writing prompt stories?
I don't have a worst, but I have a hardest. The hardest one I've ever had to do was you were given like a poem and you had to extrapolate off of the poem. Not necessarily like exact, but like off of what you thought. And it was one of those like really obscure poems. I don't even remember what poem it was, but I appreciate poetry. I struggle with it. greatly. And so even just being handed a poem, I'm like, I don't even know what this is about. And then I kind of, so it was the hardest one I've ever had to do, where I had to like find a narrator out of this poem and then figure out what it was about in terms of just the feeling and the theme of it. And then to be able to go from there was really, really tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also struggle with poetry. Yeah.
So these poem prompts that I've got for today, then I'm going to hand out. I'll just
right, lay them on us. Come on.
they're limericks, actually.
Oh, okay. I might be able to handle a limerick. Yeah, stump the prose writers.
There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, that's true, isn't it? That is true, because poetry was the thing I hated at school and hated writing. So, yeah, if you gave me a prompt to write poetry, I'd probably just say, okay, that's it. My career as a writer is now officially over. So,
yeah, we had to. So for our very first course, it was a core class, and we had to write in all three genres: fiction, poetry, and creative nonfiction. And my professor was a poet. So it's really interesting being forced to tackle these projects in poetry and CNF, because it's not something I would choose to do on my own. And the CNF I've written, which is personal and reflective as opposed to like craft and instructional, isn't necessarily stuff I deem worthy of sharing with an audience. So taking this class really forced me out of my comfort zone as a writer, which in itself is a kind of writing prompt, because, speaking of the brain and creativity as a muscle, it forces you to exercise new muscles that can be kind of weak. So, even if you never show it to anybody, it can be really useful to go, okay, I'm going to write a poem. I'm going to think in metaphors and lyrical phrases. How am I going to do that? Right.
And I think when given a poetry prompt, because I had a workshop teacher who was a poet as well, so we did a number of poetry things. I find the more structured, the easier it is for me to, because I'm like, okay, I can do this. I can get so many syllables per line, fit it into a structure. But when you tell me, oh, just free write a poem, I'm like, terrified.
Yeah.
That's right. I can just scan them. Your poetry is weak.
Right. Oh, mine is like the worst. But it does force you to think in a way that is very different than prose, and it gets your brain working in a way that can be very complementary to what you're doing. It's just, oh man, it's tough.
It is.
Punishment, take these 4 writing prompts and come back tomorrow morning with 1 haiku, 1 limerick, 1 rhyming, 1 non-rhyming.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're talking about best and worst. As I say, I've never formally used them and not seen a need for it. And so when I say I don't need them, that's what I mean by that. Okay, why? But then again, I suppose you could say more broadly that the main fiction series I'm working on at the moment came from somebody saying, "Hey, you want to be in a short story anthology? Sure. What shall I write? A short story, genre, anything." Okay, so that in itself, I suppose, is a writing prompt.
Write a short story.
And write a short story, yeah. And I'd not done that for a long time, so it was a prompt for an entire new series, and it's actually been really worthy. So, yeah, interesting.
Very cool. All right, so what are the prompts? We are going to share some prompts with each other and you, the audience, and then we're going to pick one, go do the writing prompt, and then in next week's episode, we will share the results of our having done the writing prompt with everybody. So we're going to be brave.
Does that mean people think that we've got a week to go away and write these?
No. We're going to pause, write for 15 minutes, and then you'll see we're all wearing the same clothing, same lighting, same hairdo. But we'll put the writing prompt in the show notes. So if anyone listening would like to go and do the writing prompt and come back, before watching the next episode, that will be kind of a fun option. It'll be like our own workshop.
Yes, live workshop with SWRT. Whee!
All right. Well, I brought, in honor of my worst and best writing prompt ever, I brought 2 news clippings.
Cool.
Yay!
Yay. One is about an e-cigarette exploding in a man's pants at New York City's Grand Central Station, which could be, really tragic or really comedic. You could play that
Yeah.
either way. And then the other one, the headline is Ice Cream Killer is so dangerous, she's headed to a men's prison. And this was a very strange story about an Austrian woman known as the Ice Cream Killer who shot an ex-lover and her ex-husband in the heads, 2 different incidents, and then chopped up their bodies and hid them in the freezer of her ice cream shop. So, and this thing...
We could learn a lot about each other as writers through prompts like that.
Through what kind of stories you pick out.
Go?
Well, I thought this one was interesting because you could take the point of view of the killer or do a detective, or so the bodies were found by, I believe, plumbers who were working on her apartment, and as they were going in for the pipes, found the remains of her victims under her floor. So you could be the plumber, you could be a prison guard. Like, there's so many different characters in this very short news clip to come at the story from different angles. You could be one of the victims, So I thought that was a pretty rich story. Although, yes, it is quite dark.
I'd hate to see your very, very dark stuff.
Oh, that's published. Yeah. So what's one of the prompts you brought, Robert? 1 or 2 or?
Okay. So mine are in question form. Your lifelong best friend, who you just helped at great sacrifice to yourself, has announced they have been told by their therapist to cease all contact with you with no explanation. How does this affect your plans, and what action will you take? There you go. That went down well.
Oh, are you going to read all 5? I thought you were going to keep going. I was waiting for you to
read all 5.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, if they're all that short. Yeah, read them all.
Yeah. They're all that short. Yeah. Number 2. You wake up in a cage to find you've been undergoing genetic alterations. What newfound skill do you wish you had, and why would it make returning to society extremely dangerous?
That's interesting.
Yeah. A lot of mine are like that. Your likable hero or heroine is a master criminal along the lines of Robin Hood. What does he or she steal from the elite that the masses are desperate for, and what is his or her motivation to do so? It's kind of a bit generic premise character one. 4th, your protagonist discovers there is a shocking secret to their very existence. What is it? How does it come to life? And last, your hero has just inherited a spaceship, vehicle, boat, house. What valuable secret, as yet unknown to your protagonist, does the ship contain, or boat, or vehicle, or house?
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. Okay. All right, Catherine, do you have one for us?
I do.
Or more.
Mine is...
One or more.
So I have a favorite book of prompts that somebody gave to me years ago. It's called The Writer's Book of Matches. And so they're all just like little snippets. And this one's dialogue. And it just says, "You don't have enough points, sir." The end.
Ooh. Hey.
Enough points. Cool. Did you have any other favorites from there you wanted to share?
This whole thing is like chock full, oh my goodness, of everything. And I did a Google search too, actually. I just put in writing prompts, and you can find a lot of very similar things if you just Google. And these are my favorite, where they give you either a scenario or a dialogue, or like 4 college bandmates who haven't seen each other in years travel back to their former campus for a reunion. what happens, like just little things, and you can just take off from there. So those are my favorite.
Yeah, I was just in Half Price Books the other week getting a new journal. So I was looking at their selections, and there's one that at the top of each journal page, there's a small writing prompt like those. So you can even find them right there at the top of your page, ready to go for you.
Google itself is probably one giant writing prompt anyway, really, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
That is, just let it autofill on you and go.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, well, I have one more writing prompt. This one is coming out in the Point of View book, so this is kind of a shortened version of that writing prompt. It says, have your main character in mind. Let's put him into conflict. He just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Make the figurative cookie jar whatever you would like. Make the character who caught him someone appropriate to your story. Make your protagonist's reason for digging in the cookie jar whatever you would like, wholly justified or a lapse of judgment. Now, if we're working on POV, write in the third person past tense with a single point of view. Make certain your narrator has a strong presence. Describe, expound, reflect, and show. So we can shorten that to your character just got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But, if somebody wants a more involved prompt.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So I think we are going to stop here. We are going to select the writing prompt we are doing, and I will add it. When I edit this video, I'll add it probably as text at the end of the video. And that writing prompt will also be in the show notes at wordessential.com/storyworks roundtable. So you can join us doing this writing prompt. And then we're going to be back in about 15 minutes to share our great success, or maybe great, not so great success with everyone.
Our entertainment.
That's right.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for watching, and we will see everybody in about 15 minutes. The rules that we agreed to abide by are the rules you can find in Natalie Goldberg's Writing Down the Bones, which very simple. Use paper and pen. You want to handwrite so that you have that kinesthetic connection between the mind and the body happening. Set a timer, start writing, and don't stop your hand moving. You don't want to let the internal editor surface. So if you can't think of something to write, you actually write down, I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. And just do that until some idea pops through, and then run with it. So never let the hand stop. Thank you for listening to the StoryWorks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.